PR is all about what you put into it. And we have some clients who are not afraid to say some controversial things. And controversial things are going to get more attention than what if you're saying what everybody else is saying. You can do that, but you're not going to get the same amount of attention as if you're saying something that is different. Reporters are looking for interesting quotes. They're looking for balance in their articles. They're looking for headlines, right? And so if you're just out there saying everything's status quo and nothing is new, nothing is interesting, then you may be a quote in the story if you're lucky, but you won't be that headline. You won't be that feature article. So saying something that's a little bit more provocative, but of course you have to make sure that you're comfortable with that and that the company that you work for is comfortable with that because there's a price to pay for that as well. Um, but you also have to think about what you're saying. Is it just about your company? Because that's not interesting to other people. You have to, if you're putting out a press release, what is the impact of that press release? How is that going to impact your industry or your clients? And what does it mean for them?
Welcome everybody back to the Full Battery Media Podcast. I am your host, Sean Trace, and I have an awesome guest with me today. Would you like to tell people who you are, a little bit about what you do?
Yes, my name. Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Abbie Sheridan, and I run a boutique PR agency called Greenrose Communications, actually named after my grandparents. Um, I started the firm 5 years ago, and we specialize in the wealth management industry. So all of our clients are either financial advisors or looking to work with financial advisors, so fintech companies, asset managers. And it's great. I love the space so much, and I'm really happy to share a little bit more with you today.
That's awesome. And first of all, thank you for coming out and coming on. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is because PR, sorry, not HR, PR is one of those things that to me always is so important. But sometimes people don't understand fully what PR is doing.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you this because if someone hires you, what actually changes for them in a real practical way?
Yeah, it's funny because some people hear PR and they think PR just means we put out press releases all day, which is
Yep.
far from the truth. So when clients come to us, we really try to understand what their goals are. Each client has different goals. Um, and we've had clients come to us and get book deals because of the work that we've done with them.
That's cool.
One client was on a podcast and a book editor heard the client on the podcast and reached out to him. And now he has a published book because of it. While I will never guarantee that PR is lead generation, and really it's the opposite of lead generation, we've had clients get direct leads and close deals because
Mm.
of our PR efforts, and others who credit PR with helping them get acquired by larger companies and put them on the map. So we actually worked with another client who doubled in size over a year because of, and they credit PR for a lot of that growth. So again, it all depends on what you're looking to achieve, but those are some examples of how our work has impacted our clients.
I love that. I love that too. And I think one of the things I had a friend who worked in PR years ago. We're still good friends, but she's still in PR. But she told me this years ago when I asked, like, "Hey, what do you do?" And she says, I said, how do you help companies? And she's like, we help them craft stories. And I said, well, what type of stories? And she says, the right story. And I was like, well, what does
Mhm.
that mean? And she's like, well, we have to make sure that they are creating the narratives that are going to drive the right type of attention and also create the right
Mhm.
branding for them. And I wanted to know this because, there's a lot of different types of attention, but why do some companies get a lot of attention while others just as good get ignored?
Yeah, it's a really good question. PR is all about what you put into it. And we have some clients who are not afraid to say some controversial things. And controversial
Mm,
things are going to get more attention than what if you're saying what everybody else is saying.
mm,
You can do that, but you're not going to get the same amount of attention as if you're saying something that is different. Reporters are looking for interesting quotes, they're looking for balance in their articles, they're looking for headlines, right? And so
Mhm.
if you're just out there saying everything's status quo and nothing is new, nothing is interesting, then, you may be a quote in the story if you're lucky, but you won't be that headline. You won't be that feature article. So saying something that's a little bit more provocative, but of course you have to make sure that you're comfortable with that and that the company that you work for is comfortable with that because there's a price to pay for that as well. Um, but you also have to think about what you're saying. Is it just about your company? Because that's not interesting to other people. You have to, if you're putting out a press release, what is the impact of that press release? How is that going to impact your industry or your clients? And what does it mean for them?
Often, you won't hear about what PR companies are doing until someone says something extremely provocative, and then, the PR agency and the PR people come in and clean that up, you know? But,
Yeah.
are do you recommend people lean into stuff that's a little bit more provocative to try to get that attention, or do you think it's better to keep it a little bit more, or is it client by client?
It's 100% client by client. We have some clients who are very comfortable with being more provocative and they work for themselves, right? So they're able to do
Yeah.
that. If they report to a larger team or larger company, then that could mean some bad things for them if they were to say something that doesn't align with the firm or the branding. So my job is not to make anyone feel uncomfortable or put them in a situation that wouldn't be beneficial to them in their business. My job is to help them essentially be their megaphone. So I like to make
Oh,
sure that whatever they're saying, they're comfortable with, their boss is comfortable with, um, and then just you know give them the ability to share that publicly. But we do try to help them lean into the interesting story, find their narrative. If it's not interesting enough, we will tell them, right? I'm not just going to sit there and say, yeah, this is interesting. We're going to ask questions and we're going to try to find that story. But if you're not comfortable going to extremes, then I'm not going to force you to do that.
I love that. That's really interesting. And it's again finding people where they're at. But then as someone, companies and professionals that are watching this, and they're asking this question, like, at what point does a business or a
Mhm.
professional actually need PR? When do you need to start bringing that in?
Yeah. It really comes back to what your goals are and what you're looking to achieve. So, we've actually worked with some really small businesses who I was impressed. They were ready to go for PR. And actually, one of the companies I'm talking about is the one who doubled their assets under management over the course of 1 year since working with us. I think it's great to start small because you have to start somewhere, and sometimes if you start when you're a little bit too big, it can feel a little bit late to the game. When you're smaller, you can likely be a little bit more nimble. You can be more provocative with your sound bites. But one challenge to think about is who's going to own the relationship between the firm and the PR company because it definitely is a partnership, and while I call us magicians all the time, we still need your insights, your time to have a successful partnership. So, it just goes back to how much time do you have to devote to PR and, do you have the budget for it? Even if it's a small budget, you can always find a partner to work with you, a freelancer or a boutique agency like ourselves. Um and also, trying to understand what your goals are, and if you don't know what your goals are, we can try to help you figure that out as well.
I love that. It's interesting too because I think that so many companies, so many individuals, they're like, I want to be successful, but they don't fully always understand the goals and the
Yeah.
path to get there, like success. Like, well, that's really broad. Like, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to get more clients? Are you trying, I mean, obviously, most people are,
Yeah.
but like you stated earlier, that some people are trying to get acquired and their goal is
Mhm.
not just to get more clients, it's to get position themselves in the visibility to do certain things. And if someone is starting from 0 with no audience, no brand, where would you have them focus first?
I mean, I think a really simple place to start is just content. A lot of brands are already pushing out and creating their own content now. I have to say, with a caveat, no AI generated content. You can use AI to brainstorm, but yeah, editors and reporters are really serious about not publishing anything that's been AI generated. So if you already are creating your own content or are thinking about creating your own content, that's a great place to start. Your PR team can repurpose some of that content in our pitches. We can craft op-eds for you and publish them under your name in publications. So that's a really kind of low stakes way to get started. Also, if you're not as comfortable or familiar with talking to the media, this kind of cuts that out. You don't have to deal with journalists. We can just place the articles for you. And then another big thing before you get started is just making sure that your messaging is in order. Your team is aligned with your messaging. So, what I mean by that is everyone's describing the company in the same way. So, if we were to put three
Mm,
different people in front of reporters, would you all be saying the same, describing the company the same way? Or would you be saying different
mhm.
things? Because obviously, we want to make sure that you're saying the same thing. And one thing that we do when we first start with clients is media train them. Make sure that that they're
Interesting.
comfortable talking to the journalists. They have their talking points down. They know how to. They have their elevator pitch. They know how to describe the company, do's and don'ts when talking to reporters, things like that. And we also educate them on the process because it is a process. And if you aren't familiar with that, you could maybe say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, offend their journalist, and we don't want any of that to happen. So it's definitely an education process as well.
What are some of the mistakes people make when talking to a journalist? What are some of the things that people kind of mess up with?
I think a big thing is not reading the journalists' articles before you talk to them. So, maybe saying something like, "Oh, I'm not familiar with what you cover." And what we do for all of our clients is we share prep materials with them in advance. So, that has information on the journalist, their past articles, some sample questions that we come up with. But I mean, one thing that we tell our clients is uh, PR is not advertising, so we have no control over the final article. So we can't ask the reporter to see the article before it publishes, or if some reporters do
Mm,
fact check. But I think if some people may have a different perception that they have, this control over the article, and so that could also rub journalists the wrong way, right? If you're like, can I see what you published before you put it out? That's a big
mm.
no-no.
It's interesting too because you don't think about that, but, like,
Yeah.
I have had early on when I started my podcast, there was a couple times where I didn't do my research on a guest, and I came in
Ugh.
and they looked at me. I made that mistake one time, and I never made that again, man,
Yeah.
and it was like I said something, and they looked at me, and they were like, "Yeah, no." Uh, yeah, I remember watching one interview where uh, the journalist was like, thought these 2 different actors were the same person. I was, like, blown
Oh,
away by that. That's wild.
awkward.
But I was like, "That wasn't you?" Yeah, yeah, right? But again, preparing is really important, whatever you're
Yeah.
doing?
Do your
I wanted
homework.
to ask. Right? Do your homework. I
Huh.
mean, whatever you're doing, do your homework. You think it's something that seems simple, but a lot of people forget?
Yeah.
But I wanna ask you this too, like, what's something people think is helping them grow, but really isn't?
Yeah, I think probably self-serving press releases. I think a lot of people think about press releases like, "Oh, I'm gonna put out a press release and everyone's gonna be so interested." But really, I think going back to my earlier point just about not just talking about your company and what you're doing that's so amazing, but what is it that's actually how is this impacting your audience, your clients? Um, I think, you know, a lot of the work that we do is pushing out press releases. So just putting it on the wire doesn't do anything besides, SEO, GEO purposes, but we put the press release in front of journalists. So I think if people are just putting out a press release over the wire and expecting something to come from it, they're going to be really disappointed.
Yeah. It's interesting too, like, I've worked with people, for a long time in video, and one of the things too is, like, people think that a piece of content or something like that's gonna have this, like, magical, like, effect. It's like
Yeah,
suddenly
yeah,
everything's gonna change, and they're like,
right,
"It's gonna be the thing," and you're like,
right.
"Well, it
Yeah,
might help,
it might
but
help.
it might be." You gotta have a plan, you gotta keep at that plan, you know? Because I think
Yeah.
that sometimes people think that there's this magical thing that people do, and it's like, well, it's consistency. It's consistency in your messaging, and it's
Yes.
about showing up again and again, again with that consistent message. I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Such a good point, and I'm really glad you brought that up because I think sometimes people think, I'm here, I'm ready to talk to a reporter. Why aren't they knocking down my door? Like, I'm interesting. But what they don't realize is there's so many other people out there who are, in front of the line for these reporters that have built relationships
Right.
with them, that have worked at it for years and years. And they're saying interesting things, right? So it's not just like a one and done. It takes time. I like to tell anyone that I talk to that it can take 3 to 6 months before you start seeing that traction and you start seeing those results. But you don't turn it off. You want to continue that momentum. So it's something that you have to continue to work at and build at. The shift does change over time, but you can't stop because there's other people that will take your place in line in a heartbeat.
That's it. I think that's one of the things that people don't realize enough, like that with media and such, you have to be so active. You have to be
Mhm.
going and you have to be consistent. When I tell people that are working with me on video and they're like, "Oh, I want to do video, but I'm going to do a little bit here and then I'll take a couple months break." I'm like, I said, "Hey,
Yeah,
I recommend doing less, but having it be more consistent than doing
yeah,
more and then burning out because you got to figure out what you can maintain because otherwise you're just not gonna be able to sustain it, and that's the
yeah,
worst thing that you can do with your modern media plan, you know?
yeah, 100% agree.
I wanna ask you this though too, because, you're working with a lot of really interesting, people and you have a lot of different perspectives, like, from people that you're working with, but when the media, when press releases aren't landing, what's usually the real issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to what we were just talking about. Number 1, the content is too self-serving.
Oh,
It's not relevant for the audience. Like, why do I care if the company has hit a major milestone? Now, if you can tell me, reposition it in a way that, this is major growth and you have the proof points to show for it, then maybe. But another point is that have you built those relationships with the reporters? Or are you just coming out? This is your first ever
yeah.
announcement. This is your first ever piece of content. Then no, well, chances are people just aren't going to be paying attention because you haven't built that brand.
One of the things that I talk to people about with podcasting, and I think I absolutely love is that my podcasts are one of the best ways that I can network with really cool people.
Mhm.
And that, living in Asia for a long time, uh, in the US, I think people tend to think, yeah, everything's merit based. You work your way into it. But in Asia, they're like, no, it's relationships. Like relationships are the bread and butter of success. And one of the things that I think that people don't realize is, like, it's not just about, like, "Hey, hi, my name's Tom, it's nice to meet you. Hey, and I'm gonna sell you something now." Man, people see right through that. It's about the authentic
Yeah.
relationship. It's about taking that time to really show people, to find ways to develop that. Um, my wife is a I didn't mention this, my wife is a famous singer here in Vietnam. She was, like, the first winner of Vietnam Idol,
Oh,
so
cool.
she's it's pretty cool, right? And so
Wow.
I do all of her music videos and all of that content. So when, Beyoncé did The Lion King and they needed someone in Vietnam to do Beyoncé, they picked my wife, which is pretty cool,
Wow.
right? Yeah, so
That's
she did
awesome.
Nala in The Lion King. Now, when she was on these big shows, she would have to have PR and people that would connect to the press. And one of the things that it was like this constant, it was a lot of relationship building, getting out and talking to the people.
Mhm.
And some of it for her, because she's an introvert, felt really tough
Mhm.
because it wasn't about like, what can I do one time? And the PR team that we were working with is like, this isn't one time. This
Yeah.
is about you actually getting out, talking to these people, and being sometimes a little bit vulnerable and
Mhm.
the reality of your situation. And it was really tough for her, but we had a great PR team that kind of guided her through those steps and made this show a success. But it wasn't always easy, and I wanna ask you that, like, for someone who this isn't natural to, for my wife and I,
Yeah.
when she's on stage, she's great. For me, talking to people, I'm like, "Oh, great,
Yeah.
strangers, let's talk." But some people, that ain't easy, And how do
Yeah.
you help people who are having a hard time, with that?
It's really interesting. Since we launched 5 years ago, we work with a lot of, women-owned businesses, a lot of women launching their first businesses, and I had a client say to me, "I don't know how I'm supposed to act, how am I supposed to talk to people?" And I told her, "Just be yourself. You don't wanna come across like anybody else, you don't wanna try to be like
Yeah.
anybody else, just be yourself because otherwise it's not gonna feel authentic." And for her, I mean, it was so simple what I said, but for her, that was a moment of I can I can be myself. I can lean into that because she was always working for other people who would tell her how to act or how to do this, don't do that. Um, and she finally had that permission to be a little bit quirky, to lean into her personality. And so I always tell people, just be yourself. And it may feel a little uncomfortable at first, but at the end of the day, you're just talking to a reporter who is another person, essentially. You were just make that personal connection. When we share these briefing materials with our clients in advance, we will always try to highlight something personal about the reporter, nothing creepy, but something that's already publicly
Right.
available. So, then the client can go to the reporter and say, "Oh, I saw you went to Syracuse University. I am from that area as well." And then, maybe there's something to connect on, or our clients who are really into sports can connect with journalists who are really into sports. Um, so it can feel a little uncomfortable at first, but I think once clients get over that initial realization that, oh, this is just another conversation. And for our clients too, it's just like talking to one of their clients. That's kind of how we position it to them because a lot of our clients are advisors, so they work with investors. And so we just tell them talk to a reporter like you're talking to another client, and that usually helps them that understand that he's just another person at the end of the day.
I love that. I worked in Hollywood earlier in my career and got to meet some wonderful, cool, interesting people. And, really interesting. Tom Hanks, one of the most genuine, nice people you ever meet.
Oh,
Uh,
I'm
but
so happy to hear that.
yeah, Tom's awesome. And, it was wild because we were working. I'm gonna do a little Tom story here. We were working on the
Yeah.
Sony lot, and we were working. Do you know Tom's filmography? We were working in the stage that they filmed Joe versus the volcano.
Oh,
And so one
wow.
of Tom's early movies that they had to, and he was like, we're just standing there looking at this, and I'm just reading the movies. I didn't know he was standing right behind me. So I'm just reading the movies, and I was just like, wow, Joe versus the volcano. And he's like, yeah, it was kind of tough to film that. They actually took out the whole floor and flooded the whole thing, and I had to sit on suitcases. And I'm just like, and he just launched into this story, and I was just like, this is so cool. And one of the other people that I absolutely love and is one of my favorites is oh my goodness, I'm blanking. He's one of my favorite actors too. Jeff
What's it?
Goldblum. Jeff
Oh, he's
Goldblum.
hilarious. Yeah.
He's funny. And like I'm sitting in line at Whole Foods and I went to Whole Foods all the time and I have this burrito that they made for me, this special burrito, and it was really delicious. And all of a sudden I hear this like sing-song voice and he turns like, "Can I ask about the burrito?" And I was just like, I turn over and it's like, "Oh my God, it's Jeff Goldblum is asking me about a burrito." And I like all these thoughts, because I love his movies. I always wanted to say something. I was like, "It's a great burrito, Jeff. It's an amazing burrito." That's all I could think to say in that moment. It's like, "Oh, I'll have to try one sometime." And I'm like, "You should. You really should." And, like, it was like, it's like, I was cracking up when I went out to the car and my ex was in the car. She's like, "What just happened?" I was like, "I just met Jeff Goldblum." And it was like, "Oh, what was it like?" We talked about burritos. And I was just like, it was the most normal thing that you could think of. Like, everyone's just human at the end of the day, whether they're some
Yeah.
superstar, whether they're some like, press person, whatever. Everyone's just a person trying to get through their day. And I think
Yeah.
that helps me take out kind of the jitters when I talk to someone that's really big or famous,
Just go back to the burrito.
100%. 100%. It's a good burrito too. I wanna ask you another question. Finance isn't exactly exciting for most people. Like, how do you help people make it connect, especially for your clients that are trying to figure that out?
Yeah, I think I'm the perfect person for this question because I never thought I'd be working in finance. I always had number anxiety. I was always a comms person. Writing was my jam. But I found this industry by happenstance, and I have loved it because it's so dynamic. And I also love the people in this industry. So everyone that we work with is just trying to help someone else or really focus on being good humans and helping their clients. Um, and so that's what's made me passionate about the industry. There's so much going on. Um, there's, 401k legislation and ESG investing, and all these rules are always changing, and
Right.
um, private investments in 401ks. That's another thing right now that people are talking about. So there's, even though it might sound like, oh, finance is, so boring, there's always something happening. And it's actually really interesting because not only is it, are we doing this on behalf of our clients, but I'm also learning a ton from my own personal financial education as well. So it's been
Right.
incredibly eye-opening from that perspective as well. And and my team is a pretty young team as well. So I always love bringing people into this industry because they learn. It's like a free crash course in financial education that we would not never otherwise get.
Yeah. I I am not a financial professional. I will say that right away. But I have a financial podcast. Like I have my Growing
Yeah.
Money with Sean Trey's podcast. And the reason I started that was so that stupid people like me can have me ask the questions because I don't know anything about money. And yet I was having a 10-year-old, my daughter ask me, Dad, what can I know about money? What's this mean? What's this mean? I didn't know. And I would just wanted to create the media that showed like, all right, well, let's find people who do. And it was really interesting too, because it was a great way to kind of bridge that gap. And one of the things that people, when they talk to me, they were like, Sean, I love talking to you because you help me see this as a, um, make it seem more human, more personal. I think that's one of the things too, is like, I'm trying to tell people is like, I want to hear their experience with money. I want to hear where they come from
Yeah.
because I think that one of the things is as we talk more about AI and as that AI content gets more and more, I think having the more human side is gonna be something that really helps people build that trust connection, you know?
Yeah, 100%. And at the end of the day, I think that's what our clients are doing. It's just, I mean, there's a ton
Yeah.
of personal finance reporters out there. So making it more accessible and more digestible is the key. I probably didn't answer your question the first time around, but I think you helped me get there. Thank you.
No problem. With things like things like ESG and green investing, how do you tell what's real versus just messaging?
That's such a good question. We work with a number of advisors and asset managers in the grain investing space. And I've
Mhm.
learned a lot since working with them. I would say number one thing is just do your research, checking out their content, checking out their website. Are they a part of any organizations? Um, B Corp, I think, is a really good organization to look at to see if the clients listed there. A lot of our ESG clients talk about looking under the hood of your investments. So um, if this is an investment that you're looking at, you want to really see the companies that you own that are part of that uh, portfolio, because there's a lot of companies out there that are marketing things as an ESG fund, but then they have companies in there that are not ESG. They
Mm.
have fossil fuels, for example, or McDonald's in there is one example that I've heard a lot from one of our clients. So you just want to dig a little bit deeper. And also, if you have questions, I would suggest talking to your financial advisor because they should be able to help either point you in the right direction, or if you don't have one, that's a great opportunity to get one.
I love that. I think that's great advice as well. You know, and I think that's one of the things too is like I love being able to help people connect and I bring all these financial advisors on, and I love trying to help people see the human side of this person. And like, I found my financial advisor because they were so amazingly normal in their videos
Yeah,
as well. And I was
yeah,
just like, this person I can understand. And it was the trust. It was the trust that I had
yeah.
built with them because of how they presented themselves on video. And I wanted to ask you about trust because you're working with that a lot. And what builds trust faster? Is it consistency over time or is it one big moment of attention?
So definitely consistency over time. Reporters have to build the trust with you, and so does the public. So one big moment of attention can be fun, but after the dust settles, you have to think about how do you continue to stay top of mind with the media. And the news cycle moves fast, and people will forget about you if you're not constantly, top of mind. So we're always pitching for our clients, even if they've never had that one big moment of attention. It's about that consistency, and beating that drum. What's the next thing? What are we pushing out there next? Because it definitely builds.
Yeah. It was interesting for me because as I work with people on video, they ask me, "Well, what's my most important video?" And I'm like, "Your next
Mm.
one." Like
Oh, good
it's
point. Yeah.
it's your next one. What's your most
Yeah.
important piece of content is the next one. And they, "Oh, should I be viewing all the metrics and this and that?" I'm like, not really. Like, if your video bombs or if it absolutely takes off, yeah, let's see why. But
Yeah.
really, as long as we have a good strategy and you're headed in the right direction and we keep them coming and you're not doing horribly, but I mean, like I tell people in the beginning, sometimes you do horribly.
Mm.
Sometimes it takes a time to get things going, and
Yeah.
that's okay. But you just continue refining and get used to it. But like, people ask me this, um, when do you know something is actually working versus it's just looking like it's working, you know?
Yeah. So I'm curious to hear what you say to your clients. From a PR perspective, usually around like 6 month or 1 year mark is when we, instead of having to consistently push out the client, what we start to see instead is reporters coming to the client.
Yep.
So that's a big turning point for us with the client. Um, that's how we know that we have made an impression on the reporter and that they keep coming back. They want you. And then, like I mentioned at the beginning of the call, you'll start to see some of these things happen where you'll get book deals, you'll get clients reaching out. But for us, I would say 6 month, 1 year mark, reporters start coming to you. Um, that's for us, that's how we know we've done a really good job.
Yeah. I find too, one of the things that has always been helpful for me with clients is to also, again, you start to see people come their way.
Mm.
And for me as well, even on some of my podcasts, like I, you know, it's interesting in the beginning, man, I had to hunt for guests. Now I have a lot of
Mhm.
people going, "Hey, I would love to talk to you
Yeah.
about how I can be
Yeah.
a guest in your podcast." I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
wow, this is fun. What do you do, man? I'd love to hear more." And
Yeah.
there,
That's how you know it's
it's
working.
it's working when you start getting those things, and whether it
Mhm.
be leads or for a lot of my clients, they want to see leads. They want to see people calling and trying to
Mhm.
book with them. They want to start getting that sales funnel in action. And I say, what I try to tell them is to be consistent with it and
Mhm.
that you might not know what it's going to look like. You might have this idea. Oh, I'm going to get someone who just, cold calls me. But it might be that your videos reactivate someone who's seen you before, or someone you know, and they're
Mhm.
like, hey, you know what? I got this other person I want to introduce you to. You don't know how things are going to flow. But the most
Mhm.
important thing is to be visible. You have to be visible because if you're not visible,
Yeah.
nothing's going to happen.
Yeah. We actually had a client, who responded to talk to a journalist. This was during COVID times, about money moves to me during COVID, and I believe it was a U.S. News and World Report reporter. So kind of mid tier. Um, from that story, an Investopedia article, or sorry, an Investopedia reporter reached out and said that they would like to talk to that client because they had seen that article. And then the Investopedia article published. New York Times reporter reached out because they had seen the Investopedia article on the same topic. So we always tell clients media begets media, even if, let's say one of those outlets wasn't the top choice for the client, it ultimately led them to the New York Times. So you have to keep putting yourself out there and, talking to these journalists, even if it's not, Wall Street Journal front page above the fold, it still means something and people are reading.
100%. Well, I want to ask you one more question. What's something people don't want to hear about building a brand, but they really need to?
I think going back to your point earlier, it really is about consistency. It doesn't happen overnight. And it just takes time. You have to show up, you have to make time for it. You have to take the journalist calls, you have to meet tight deadlines, and it will pay off. Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither is anyone's media presence. So that's my tip.
I love that. Rome wasn't built in a day, and I wish more people understood that quote and referenced it more often because that's one of my favorite things to say.
Yeah.
And I think that it's like one of the best things you can say is that whatever you're doing that's worth doing is going to take time. And if you keep doing it, you'll get there eventually.
Yeah, you will. With the right people, you will.
With the right people, you will, right? That's it. Which leads to my next question. Where can people go to find out more about you and what your team does?
Yeah, so our website, Greenrose PR, green like the color, rose like the flower, PR for public relations.com.